Which of these two categories for you is a truck to draw? Because I think there are two main categories that we have when we draw things. There are the subjects that really interest us, that we've observed for a long time, carefully, perhaps even for decades before we started to draw, simply because we love the way they look, we love the things they do. But something about them has compelled us to pay more attention to them and to be particularly interested in them. And then there are those subjects which are part of everyday life, and we've looked at them with the familiarity of various things that surround us without a particular interest. And it does make a difference which of these two categories the subject that we're drawing at any particular moment is, because the first category, we have more familiarity because we have seen them, looked at them, studied them. And this all pays off when we start to draw, because it gives us a head start, really, when we look at our reference. However, if they're in the second category, if we're unfamiliar with them, they become a real challenge, because there's really nothing that we can take for granted, and taking anything for granted is likely to be perilous, therefore. Now, for me, a truck is in this second category. I've never particularly had an interest in vehicles except as a way of getting from one place to another. And I've never particularly paid attention to them except in that generalized way we pay attention to things that are around us in our day-to-day life. But it means when I come to draw them, I'm really thrown back onto all of my observation skills, my alignment skills, my keeping things in proportion skills, in order to have a truck that doesn't just look like a truck, which can be enough of a challenge, but looks like the particular truck that I'm drawing. Now, this is a tip truck, and the back is raised. But I came across this truck on the weekend. It's not working at the moment. And that blue band across the bonnet simply had the name of the company on it. So I took that off. And you'll see that I started this truck with the windscreen, because I like to start drawing freehand in ink with an element of the drawing that I feel like I can have best chance of getting in proportion most accurately, most easily. And that was the windscreen. And you'll notice that I put a line across it, which is actually the line of the shadow. I did that because lines such as that actually can change the way we perceive proportion. When a shape is divided, it's hard not to somehow let that division influence the way we perceive. So I've put that in too, just to help me check that I've got this in the right proportion. Being happy enough with that, I then moved down, and I've included in this video some of the marks that I put on the reference to help me align, to help me judge the key parts where I'm thinking, well, what's the distance between here and here in the reference? Because I've got one of those points on my drawing and I'm about to draw the other. So I'll reference the second point that I don't yet have established in relation to the first. Now, in some ways, this is straightforward. There's lots of horizontal lines, but the vertical lines don't necessarily align above each other much at all. And so they're the ones that we have to work out how far to the left or to the right they go. Always that extra challenge, drawing freehand in ink. There's no erasing. Depends a bit on our drawing style though. If you have a drawing style that has more, if you like, roughing out element lines as part of the finished drawing, then there can be a little more of those sort of guidelines placed. The sorts of things that I would use sometimes with rows of windows that are all lined up very exactly and very geometrically. I might have some marks on my facade that aren't strictly there. But not being so familiar with drawing a truck, I'm not as gestural. I'm a little more thoughtful and slower. Speaking of speed, you're watching this at double speed. So if you'd like to watch me draw this in real time, go to the cog icon that YouTube provides and reduce the speed of this video to half speed. My voiceover will still be quite intelligible. Well, as intelligible as it ever is. But you will be able to then see me draw this at actual drawing speed. I know that some people find that a benefit. And so, having started with the windscreen and then coming down for the bonnet, coming towards us, paying particular attention to the foreshortening. And then I come down the grille and I go left and right to the fenders coming out over the wheels. And I'm always looking at the angles and trying to get them as best I can. Despite that, quite frequently I look at them and I think, oh, that's not quite right. How did I miss that? And the simple truth is that once we've put something on our paper, it's easier then to reference a more exact line because I've got something to go off. But that's not always helpful, and sometimes it's better just to leave the line being slightly too high or too low. It simply depends on how it's looking. Now, another challenge is as we get down lower in the truck body, the lines start to angle up instead of angling down because eye level is changing. With something such as a truck, it's still important to work out eye level, but it's made a bit more complicated here because the truck is not parked on flat ground. The ground is sloping down. There is a camber down towards the right of our picture, so the truck is leaning something. It's also not straight in this video, so I am sorry for that. And it wasn't actually straight in real life either, which I realized once I began to draw, which is why there was a slight paper adjustment where I tilted what I was drawing. So all these things do add up to making it slightly more challenging to capture the perspective, but don't make the mistake of thinking that perspective is just for buildings. Perspective is how we see something from a particular viewpoint. Anything at all, everything we see is influenced by perspective. It's just that with buildings, it's more obvious. And I think with vehicles, it's particularly challenging, which means careful observation becomes even more crucial to how it normally is. And whereas I normally talk about drawing by seeing the three-dimensional forms and feeling that form on our paper before we start to bring it into being with marks of all sorts combined and overlain on each other, with vehicles I find it's often more helpful to do the opposite, to not think of this 3D form, but to see it as a series of shapes that are pieced together and to copy the shape. So one shape, for instance, would be that dark bit under the tray that's lifted up in its tilt. See that as a shape in the reference, a dark shape, and then try and, as best I can fit in with what I've already drawn, replicate that shape. And look, if you're finding this helpful, please hit the like button for me. It actually makes a big difference. And I'd love to have a comment, if not just to say whether you're finding this format helpful or if you've got suggestions of other subjects I might like to draw or other things that could improve my channel or make it more helpful to people that are practical for me to do, then I'd love to hear that and have a chance to consider whether I think I can accommodate that thought. Now we've got the back wheels. And again, I'm not just thinking, oh, wheels, I'll draw them. I'm aligning every part of these wheels. I'm looking at where the bottom of these back wheels are in relation to what I've drawn and where the top is. I'm also looking to see how far out to the left they go. And what I realise is that both wheels basically still line up with the back of the truck. And that means I have to be extra careful to make them nice and squeezy thin because they're very foreshortened. They've become very thin ellipses. However, the front wheels are aligned straight ahead to the vehicle as well as the back wheels. And so the ellipses are basically the same. It's just that they're smaller further back. unlike the truck I did a week ago, I think, where the front wheels were actually turned and therefore presented more of a circle and therefore presented a thinner ellipse because the wheels were turned so that they were more front on to us from our viewing position compared to the back wheels, which were still going straight ahead, which meant we were seeing more of a circular shape with those back wheels. So these are the things where careful observation pays off. And now I'm just adding a few end bits. Now, as we sort of reach the peripheries, sometimes small errors start to accumulate and it can be a bit tricky to squeeze things in. I had a few problems in that top left corner with just fitting everything in. However, I think at that point what we need to do is to draw something that looks credible on our drawing rather than distorting things so as somehow to fit more accuracy in. Now at this point it's pretty much done except for the windscreen. I think it's really helpful not to leave the windscreen just blank such as this. It doesn't represent reality, and it's a fantastic opportunity to experiment with how we represent these things. This is basically a drawing exercise. This is where I have fun. For me, I'm experimenting with a subject I don't normally draw, but it's also a chance to just go for it and to try and do things that I might think of as being hard or I try and avoid. And one of those things is, how do we represent the reflections? And part of the problem is that we disconnect from thinking of drawing what we see and somehow thinking a reflection is hard to draw because it's insubstantial, it's not real, sometimes we can see through it. Look, all of these things may make it in some ways a more complex series of values, but that's still all it is, a series of values. So how can we credibly, if need be, simplify them, but also represent them? Because by adding these values, we can do a great deal to enhance the realness of our vehicle. Particularly when we're not doing a lot of other values, a lot of other hatching to represent shade and shadow on our truck. And so really it's a case of keep going till we think we've done enough. Just keep adding the value, adding the shadows. And I realise there is a bit of a bonnet indent here and some lines that I hadn't really done because they were somewhat hidden by this blue plastic nameplate that I've blued out the name of the truck for. But otherwise, we're pretty much done. And I've used a 0.2 millimeter pen for this. And now I'm just adding the hatching for under the truck so it looks like it is a real thing sitting on a real surface, even if I don't go into detail about that. What do you think? Of course, you'll find this photo on my channel community page if you'd like to have a go drawing it yourself. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this really helpful. For me, it's an unfamiliar subject. For you, it may be a favourite subject that you've drawn a lot. But either way, there are challenges. So why not have a go? And either be helped by prior observation or see it as a challenge in therefore developing our skill application more. But look, however familiar or not this subject is, and however how much work it ends up being for you because of that, make sure you have fun. I certainly did with this truck. Even though they're not my favourite topics, it's still been a great drawing experience. And I'll see you next time.